Hi, I'm Ed. I'm a part-time driver in Brisbane, and this video is about next year's migration intake and how lowering it will be really good for Uber and Didi drivers. High migration is a really key part of Uber and Didi's business model because the higher it is, the more chance they have to replace drivers who leave with new drivers. And so long as they don't have to hold on to their drivers, they don't have to pay particularly well because they can just keep cycling new workers through. Migration's really high in Australia. It's dropping, but it's still going to be 250,000 a year or so for the next few years. And the government can change the visa system, issue fewer visas, and that number will drop. And at that point, Uber and Didi would have to treat us a lot better. I think that Uber and Didi are almost certainly campaigning for high migration behind closed doors with government. I don't have any evidence for it, but it is hard to see how it could not be happening because high migration is key to their business model and to them being able to pay really low wages and treat us badly. The political system is for sale and Uber and Didi can afford to buy it. And the fact that there's no evidence of it publicly doesn't matter so much because if they were using money to buy influence in Canberra, neither the politicians nor Uber and Didi would have any interest in telling us. In fact, it'd be more effective if they didn't tell us and kept it secret. And even though Uber and Didi haven't said anything much about migration publicly, all the business lobbies like AIG and the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Council, they've all been on the record campaigning for high migration. And big business has done it before. So they did it in the 90s and 2000s. There's a really good article about how they did that. It's mostly about the property industry, but it's sort of big business in general. And it's a great insight into how migration policy is always targeted by big business. So I think we have to assume that Uber and Didi are campaigning with government behind closed doors for high migration, and we'll never find out anything about that publicly. The economics of this is very straightforward. You get fewer drivers and there is just more bargaining power. But the politics is very tricky, and the TWU, I raised it with them, and their position was that it would be very divisive. And I don't agree with that, but I do understand the argument, and I think it's a serious and important argument. I just don't think it's right. We are like Australians and migrants, and we are different races. I'm white, lots of drivers. I'm white, lots of drivers are, South Asian or Chinese or Filipino or what have you. Talking about this can be a difficult and divisive conversation. But what I don't agree with is the idea that because it's difficult or divisive, that we don't have the conversation. Because if we don't talk about it, if we self-censor, business doesn't self-censor, government still has business in their ears. So if we are silent about this, it's not like government will make some neutral, careful, expert decision. No, government will make their decisions about migration with big business in their ear all the time. So we should absolutely be very loud to government with this. And obviously, here on the Facebook group, let's not sort of have any grief or static about, different people from different countries and stuff like that. That's not going to help. And whether you've lived in Australia for a year or 40 years, we can all benefit from this, and we're all in this together. And this is not about kicking anyone out. It's about all of us saying we would like the migration intake to not be 250,000 a year. In the future, let's have it like 50,000 or 100,000. And this can benefit all of us. So if we lower migration next year, everybody who is here now can stay, and we can turn the tables on Uber and Didi. And if migration is 50,000 next year instead of 250,000, everybody who is here now benefits. Now, if you speak up about immigration and you're a migrant, you'll get a guilt trip saying, how dare you speak about this? You're a migrant. You should just be quiet about this. And if you're not a migrant, you'll get called racist and selfish. But ultimately, this is the central way we can improve the working conditions of Uber and Didi drivers in the long term. So do what is right, speak up, and if people don't like you and call you names, life goes on. And remember that when Uber and Didi and the Business Council and Australian Industry Group and the Chamber of Commerce, when they decide to speak about migration, they don't doubt themselves for a second. So we should not doubt ourselves. They don't self-censor at all. They make sure government hears them loud and clearly. They just do it behind closed doors. And when Uber and Didi, if they went to a management consultant or a business lobbyist and asked about how to do this, that lobbyist or business consultant, that they wouldn't discourage them either. They say, yeah, right on. So it's only the workers who are being pressured to be quiet about this. So yes, it's a difficult conversation, but it's the only way we can change Uber and Didi, or it's one of the big ways in the long term we can change Uber and Didi's business model. So every Uber and Didi driver needs to get onto their local MP and senator and every political candidate they meet and tell them they want lower migration. And you do that whether you've been here for 1 year or your whole life, you need to speak up. Everybody in Australia has a right to speak freely. And in particular, I think if you are a man in the prime of your life, you have a duty to speak up about important issues that other people are scared to talk about. Now, the government is actually doing some stuff to get migration down, but let's bring it down from, I think it was 400,000 the last financial year to get it down to 250,000 this financial year and the next one. And what's really important is that although both Labor and Liberal are talking about lowering migration, they always say that before the election, and then as soon as the election's over, they've got business in the area around the clock, and they're under so much pressure to unwind it. And it's exactly the same with Labor and Liberal. So Albo said before the election something like, he wanted to have migration lower than what the coalition was talking about. And then obviously that hasn't worked out in the last couple of years. ScoMo did exactly the same. He made some noises when he got in that he was really concerned about traffic and crowds and stuff like that, but never cut migration until the pandemic. He did this sort of weird smoke and mirrors thing, had a press conference, but until the pandemic, he wasn't cutting migration. Now, migration, it's absolutely critical in the long term, but it's not an either or with all the other stuff. So people doing strikes and the stuff that the TW are doing at the Fair Work Commission, that's all great, that's awesome, and that'll probably do more in the short term, but in the long term, the main game is just getting fewer drivers. And look, I'm totally biased. I was literally running a low migration NGO until June. So by all means, yeah, I'm biased. But look into the facts yourself. Does Uber and Didi's business model rely on high migration? Do we have a political system that's for sale? Can Uber and Didi afford to buy it? Would Uber and Didi and the politicians tell us if this was happening? And would we be better off if migration was set so that it was down at 50,000 or 100,000 or 250,000? And finally, do you think we should be silent about this? Or do you think that in fact we should probably assume that big business is lobbying in private? So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I'm on the way out of the industry. If you don't agree with this, that's ultimately you guys' call, that's fine. But I'm interested to hear from you in case I've got any of this wrong. Net migration will be 250,000 next year. Do you think Uber will be more likely to treat us better if net migration was, say, 100,000 or 50,000? And yeah, do you think we should be silent about it? I think it's the wrong idea to say, look, we're a multicultural, diverse workforce, therefore we shouldn't talk about immigration. I think that's completely the wrong idea. But if you disagree, maybe I've got it wrong. Yeah, thanks, bye.